מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
להגיד בבוקר חסדך, באמונת הלילות, עלי אסור, עלי נבל, עלי היגיון וחינוך.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
ושימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך אורני.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'mim tovim, v'ratza b'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah u'b'moshe'ato u'b'Yisrael amo u'b'nvi'ei ha'emet b'tzedek.
Page 685.
Ro'eh efer lehutal hitahu, v'lo yatzil et nafsho, v'lo yomar halo sheker b'mini. Zachor ela Yaakov v'Yisrael ki avdi ata, yitzarticha eved li ata, Yisrael lo tinasheni. Machiticha av pisha'echa, v'che'anan chatotecha, shuva eli elai ki ga'alticha. Ronu shamayim ki asa Adonai, harihu tachtiot aretz, pitchu harim rina, ya'ar v'chol eitz bo, ki ga'al Adonai Yaakov, u'b'Yisrael yitahor. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol ha'olamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'oseh, ha'mdaber u'mkayem, shekol devarav emet b'tzedek, al ha'torah ve'al ha'avodah, ve'al hanin ve'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu, likdusha v'limnucha, lechavod u'tifaret, al ha'kol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach, u'mbarchim otach, yitbarach shimcha b'fi kol chai, tamid le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh Hashem. seen one of these, right? This is a how-to manual from IKEA for putting together a bookcase. And everything gets done step by step. Put this piece here and that piece there, and if you did it right, voila. It's even sturdy and might actually hold your books. By the way many people preach on the book of Leviticus, I'm convinced that most think that it reads like this IKEA manual. I want to tell you that you are being completely shortchanged. Leviticus, this formulaic sounding book, is not an ancient IKEA manual for a system that we no longer use. It's not even primarily about the concept of sacrifice. No, Leviticus is actually an essential chapter of the love story of God and Am Yisrael. But before I expect you to believe me that Leviticus is a love story, let's get clear on what I call love, because it's not what we see in the movies. You know the kinds of stories that I'm talking about. Boy hears of a girl asleep in the forest and goes to the end of the earth and back to find her and kiss her. It's love at first sight. Or, stray dog meets his lady, and although they have absolutely nothing in common, they share a plate of spaghetti and a kiss, and then come the puppies. But I think we know that this is not the reality of love, not in the way that we want. We want a love that is deeper and much more lasting. We don't just want romance or drama. We want compatibility, mutuality, intimacy. We want partnership. We want to be part of a relationship that is larger than the sum of its parts. It is this kind of love story that we find in the book of Vayikra, the love between God and Am Yisrael. The paradigm of love reflected in the book of Leviticus is one of selfless service towards one another and a deep, long-lasting commitment throughout history. Now, I have to be honest. I have often read this parsha and halfway through found myself saying, "You have got to be kidding me. Why does God care about all of this minutia?" But this year, it came to me. However confusing and maddeningly detailed these instructions are, why is not the question we should ask of Vayikra. The real question is, do I want to have a relationship with God? Do I want to prioritize what God wants from me? And when the answer to that question is yes, the why becomes kind of inconsequential. And our commitment to a relationship with God becomes as selfless an act of love as is God's love for us. At this moment, we become interested not in the why, but in the how. How do we have a relationship with God? It is here in Vayikra that we encounter the idea that it is not enough to simply affirm that we have a relationship with God. We are called to be people of specific, directed action. Reading these formulaic slaughter procedures in Vayikra reminds us that for humans, doing something tangible with our hands and our bodies makes the inner transitions that we are going through easier. This is why the ancient Israelites were told to offer sacrifices when they sinned. This is why they offered sacrifices when they moved from impurity into purity. Feast and fast days similarly were marked by sacrifices. We are people of ritual, we humans. And Vayikra reminds us that we cannot be so cerebral as to think that worship is only in our heads and in our hearts and detached from our bodies. Our earliest way of loving God through the temple cult involved all of our being. It involved a financial investment and an awareness of where we were in holy time. It involved an awareness of our class, our gender, our caste, our purity status, and our lineage. We had to be aware of all of these different aspects of ourselves in order to be in a relationship with God in the proper way. All these details were critically important because our relationship with God was a real thing, and real relationships are lived very much in the details. Now, we know this from our own lives. Marriages and relationships can fall apart due to big things, sure. But most erode, either through neglect or through death by 1,000 paper cuts. In our lives, it is the details that matter when we talk about love, not the grand gestures. Those kinds of details in myriad permutations are what make our relationships work or fall apart. The book of Vayikra is all about those day-to-day details that once maintained this relationship between God and Am Yisrael. Though it is interesting to look back nostalgically, time waits for no one. And we know the next chapter in the love story was destruction and chaos. When the temple was destroyed and we were expelled from the land, we could have concluded that the covenant was broken and that our God was lost to us. After all, we could no longer offer the priestly sacrifices. We no longer had a temple. Our rituals, our ways of purity, the place where our God dwelt, all gone. But we refused to give up that relationship. The rabbis instead renegotiated the contract, recommitting themselves and their people to worshiping God in a very different way. Ezo hi avodah shehi balev. Asks the Gemara, what is the service which is in the heart? Hoyomer, zo tefillah. The answer, this is prayer. It is here where our love story becomes truly sublime. We refused to let go of our relationship with God, even after the temple in which God dwelt was reduced to rubble, even after the land which God gave to us was taken by the Romans. We held on to our God whom we could not even see, because we still believed in the commitments we had once made to each other. It would have been so easy at this point for the rabbis to declare that we could just stop reading the book of Leviticus. After all, the temple was gone. What need did we have of a priestly manual for a cult which was no longer active? But the rabbis instead used the sacrificial cult as a blueprint and a metaphor for a new way of relationship, that of prayer. Avodah changed from sacrificial worship to prayer and observance of mitzvot, and our relationship with God continued. The rabbis looked back to the book of Leviticus and found ideas that they could salvage from the rubble of the temple cult. They retained an acute attention to detail in their refashioning of the act of avodah. The words of prayer and the order in which we say them are important, argued the rabbis. Our physical rituals, in fact, all of Jewish law, are meant to take the everyday and elevate it in service of God. The rabbis told us that it isn't enough to just acknowledge Yetziat Mitzrayim, like we're going to do in just over a week in the holiday of Pesach. The rabbis put together the Seder, a particular order of events which aid us in memory and in teaching. We remember and recite in the Pesach Haggadah, B'chol dor v'ador chayav adam lir'ot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In every generation, a person must regard themselves as though they personally had gone out of Egypt. It is not enough just to tell our story. We must reenact it through ritual, through words and actions, the same way that we once offered sacrifices. And this goes for all of our holidays and celebrations. We are told to light candles a certain way. We are commanded to do things in a certain order. Like the ancient Israelites before them, Rabbinic Jews are still people of specific, directed action, action which strives to elevate us in service to God. And the rabbis also ensured that we were reminded that we are still Am Yisrael, a people loved by and in love with our God. This morning, we all sang the words, Ahava Rabbah Ahavtanu Adonai Eloheinu. How deeply have you loved us, Adonai our God. Words penned by the rabbis to stand in for the avodah that we once performed in the Beit HaMikdash. And each morning and night, we remind ourselves of God's love for us in our new way of worshiping sacrifices of old. Because the rabbis saw themselves as not as having abandoned, but as having transformed the loving relationship between God and Am Yisrael. But what of now? Why bother studying any of this? We don't offer sacrifices anymore. Believe me, that is way outside my job description. By and large, many of us in this congregation don't even observe halakha the way the rabbis envisioned when they created their new way of being in love with God. I would even argue that we are in a similar period of change as were the exiled Israelites running from the Romans with their worship in tatters. In the last 200 years, we have undergone major events that have caused upheaval in the Jewish world. The Enlightenment and subsequent emancipation of the Jews meant that we were no longer as isolated as we were before. We now have the ability to interact with the wider world in ways the rabbis could not have conceived of. Intermarriage, being at the table when Nostra Aetate changed the way the Catholic Church viewed Judaism, the growing accessible secularism of the world around us, but then also the Holocaust and our near total evacuation of Europe. The emancipation of women and the visibility of other minorities within Judaism has also changed the landscape of leadership and politics within our synagogues. I am a member of only the second generation of women in the rabbinate, and there is still so much work to be done just to make Judaism acknowledge that half our people have just begun to be included in Jewish history and worship. Added to this, inclusion of LGBTQIA Jews, Jews of color, and the growing denominalization of Judaism all pose great demographic challenges to tradition on a scale that we have not seen before. We now also have to deal theologically with the creation of the State of Israel, a state which strives to be both Jewish and democratic, religious, but yet a place for all Jews. And yet, many of us are more at home in the diaspora and struggle to see her as Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu. We are, once again, like the rabbis newly exiled from the land with their temple cult reduced to rubble. We modern Jews are in a nadir and in need of a way to recommit our love to God again. So in the face of all this, I ask, to what end is our yearly study of the book of Leviticus? I study Leviticus because it reminds me that my love for God is deep and steeped in Jewish history. This love must be expressed in detailed, directed action. Leviticus reminds me that when circumstances change around me, I must renew my commitment to God and renegotiate the contract. I read the book of Leviticus like a woman paging lovingly through old love letters. How easy it once was. All we had to do was perform the rituals in the right way, and we knew that we would feel the love and the connection with God. Leviticus reminds us of the way our love once looked and how God was once with us. It reminds us of a simpler time. It reminds us that we have been together for so long. And if studied well, Leviticus can give us hope again. For if there's one thing that I think we can all feel in our bones today, it is that we are living in a broken world. But when we know our history, we also know that this is not the first time we have lived through great changes. When the temple fell, the rabbis held on to their sacred book. They took from it what they could, sacred time and attention to detail, and they walked forward, creating a Judaism that renewed, reworked, and reshaped their relationship with their God. So now we, children of a similarly changing time, would do well to do the same. We are the text people that the rabbis created, and we should be holding on to our sacred book, taking from it what we can, sacred time and attention to detail, and walking forward into a Judaism that renews, reworks, and reshapes our own relationship with our God, fully inclusive of all the members of the Jewish community and responsive to the unique challenges of life today. As with the rabbis and Kohanim before them, it is Leviticus, our first how-to manual, that is going to guide us and link us to the beginning of the chain of tradition. Our world has changed. Jewish sensibilities have changed. Our conceptions of the nature of God are more complex than ever before, and perhaps our understanding of the Bible is even more complex than that. But we come back to the notion of ritual, time and time again. We remember that as far back as Vayikra, we used our voices and our bodies in service to our God. And whatever we do with our changed Judaism, we will still use our voices and our bodies in service to our God. We still believe in so much of Leviticus. You shall not put a stumbling block before the blind. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. These are pillars of our ethics today. We know that the details still matter. Intention still matters. And we will always dedicate our actions to the glory of God. This we have learned from Leviticus. And this also we will bring with us into the changing future. And finally, we believe in our relationship with God and what that means for us. Throughout history, we have walked together, Am Yisrael and our God. We can see the times are changing again, but we know what to do this time, what we have done every time: renegotiate the contract. I have made so many of these Kallax bookshelves that when I buy one, I no longer need this manual to assemble them properly. I usually just recycle it with the packaging. We can never discard Leviticus in this way, because it contains one of the earliest chapters in our relationship with God, our love story, spanning millennia. Instead, the book of Vayikra gets a place of honor in the Torah, and far from being discarded, gets placed lovingly on our newly built bookshelf. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.